maximize what we can do in our region. So again, I want to thank Director Miller for being intimately involved in that as well, and to my colleagues at the Commission for allowing Napa Valley to get some funds while it's very competitive in this moment. We also have the Program Allocation Committee took action to make minor modifications to the Transit Capital Priorities Programs, which establishes funding distribution for FTA formula program funds. And lastly, the Program Allocation Committee also received a presentation on the major project investment policy. I can talk about that for 5 hours, but I'm not going to do that to you all. And we do have a significant workshop at MTC, I believe, next week, where we're going to be talking about project delivery. And some of you often hear about those headlines of how projects are over budget, whether it's BART to San Jose or Caltrain electrification. It's pretty significant. And part of what we're doing at MTC is how do we try to address that ahead of it, to be proactive, to minimize overruns, but also be more efficient with our tax dollars. So again, at this point, directors, any questions from any report? I don't see anyone in the board chambers. Laura, do we have anyone that wishes to make a question?
We do not.
All right. Thank you all for taking it easy on us. All right, at this point, let's proceed with the director's update. Director Miller.
Well, good afternoon. It's really nice to see everybody in person, and I hope that we can maintain this moving forward. Lots of things happening. Free rides and extended services to Bottle Rock again this year. The Vine will be will provide free transit for everyone from May 26th through May 29th. The Vine will be operating on an extended late night schedule to BART and around the valley so that people attending Bottle Rock can get home safely. Many thanks to Latitude 38 Entertainment for their contribution to support these free services. Caltrans officially entered into a contract with Gelati Construction for the Soskel Junction project on May 13th. The Soskel Junction groundbreaking event is being scheduled. We're having a hard time coordinating schedules, so bear with us, and we'll keep you up to date when we know the date. But it will be sometime in June.
Wonderful. I know you're coordinating a lot of different calendars, so that's no easy feat.
A reminder that the groundbreaking for the Calistoga to St. Helena Vine Trail project is on May 24th at 10 a.m. at Bothay State Park. The park fees for participants are being waived, and participants should use the main entrance at 3801 St. Helena Highway across from Larkmead Lane, and obviously this is open to the public. Bike to Wherever Day, all synonymous with Bike to Work Day, which is returning after a 2-year absence, is back. On May 20th, MVTA staff, along with thousands of other Napans, will bike to work or wherever. NVTA will be hosting an energy station right at the at Vallejo Street, just where the new Vine Trail segment is completed. And we encourage you to participate and to generate enthusiasm among your city, town, and county staff and constituents, and encourage them to get out of their cars and use alternative and clean transportation to get to work on May 20th. If you need promotional materials or information about the event, please contact Diana Meehan or Valerie Walston, NVTA staff members. NVTA's Commute Challenge began on April 11th and continues through July 11th. Participants have logged almost 8,000 miles of alternative commuting, saving over 2,000 pounds of CO2. I'm happy to report that Director Joseph and I are on the top 20 of the number of top 20 for the number of commutes using alternative transportation. So congratulations, Director Joseph. And when you show up in person at a board meeting, I'm going to give you a little gift of goodies that we have for you. The 4 North Bay County transportation agencies have launched a State Route 37 commuter website appropriately titled Commute 37. Fueled by Ride Amigos, it offers commuter benefits to encourage carpooling. Participants, just for signing up, will receive $25. To receive benefits, go to commute37.com. Participants carpooling in electric vehicles receive additional rewards. And we are also promoting this on the air on Alice 97.3 Sarah and Vinny Morning Show. We'll continue to air 2 30-second spots through Friday, May 20th to promote the Carpool Pilot Program. The pilot program is also sponsoring KCBS's radio's morning rush hour traffic report in an effort to reach Highway 37 commuters stuck in traffic. And the pilot program is funded through a grant provided by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Caltrans announced its 2022 FTA Section 5310 grant awards. NVTA was awarded 4 shuttle type buses, 2 of which will go to replace Calistoga shuttle vehicles and 2 for the Vine ADA services. The total cost of the project is $360,000, and the Section 5310 funds will make up $288,000 of the total funds. I just would like to acknowledge Tony, Rebecca, and Roxana for their excellent work and great success bringing these funds home. There are a number of staff members that the board has not met in person. I'm going to ask those who are here today to stand up. Libby Payan, she is one of our transit planners. Roxana Marati is our financial planner and analyst. And Valerie Walston is our new PIO. And Victoria Ortiz is not here today. She's working from home, but I will introduce her when she is here at the next board meeting. And finally, on a sad note, former Secretary of Transportation Norm Mineta passed away on May 3rd at the age of 90. Secretary Mineta served as the Secretary of Transportation in the George W. Bush administration and oversaw many of the changes on how we now travel post 9/11. He also served as the Secretary of Commerce in the Clinton administration, making him the first Asian American cabinet member. Chair Pedrosa, if it's okay with you, I would like to close today's meeting in honor of Secretary Mineta's memory and his many contributions to transportation.
Absolutely. Very appropriate, Director Miller. And we're also going to be honoring him at MTC, naming some scholarships after him as well.
Great. And that concludes my report.
Perfect. And to all the staff, welcome aboard. I know it's a very competitive labor market right now, but the fact that you chose to work with NVTA, it's an incredible organization doing some really important things in this moment. So welcome aboard. And I know some of us will be biking on Friday. Tune in. I think Mayor Sedgley and I are going to be racing down First Street. So you're all welcome to tune in to what's not going to be a very competitive race. Make sure Director Sedgley is muted, please. All right, we're going to proceed. Directors, actually, I do see questions. Let's see Director Canning and then Director Garcia.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. By the way, my money's on Sedgley on that race.
Please mute Director Canning.
Director Miller. Thank you for securing the funding and securing the shuttles for Calistoga. Just to confirm, those are the same size as we currently have based upon our maneuverability challenges in our mobile home parks.
That's the plan.
That's the plan, or that's the yes?
Well, we only got the funding, so we haven't ordered the buses, but that is the intention, is to get those types of shuttles, right? Yeah.
Same make and model.
Well, yeah, Rebecca is saying
Awesome.
same
Thank
make and
you.
model. Can't guarantee everything is going to be consistent, but because of the model year.
Yeah, no issue as long as the length and size are same because of what our maneuverability issues are. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Canning. Director Garcia. Director Garcia, you're muted. Go ahead.
Hang on. Wait. No, I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. No, the sound quality is really good. I mean, a lot of these Zoom meetings we have, never mind go to, you can barely hear the panel up on the, it's in the room. So I just compliment how this got together. I'd like to steal your technician. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the compliment. Director Garcia's staff is hearing that. So I don't see any other directors with their hands raised, Laura. All right. Thank you, directors. Let's move on to our presentations. Item 8.1, introduction of electric buses. Yep. Not yet. Directors, we're just waiting for the mic to come on, so give us a minute.
Okay,
There you go.
perfect.
All right.
All right, thank you. I wanted to keep the momentum going there on the good sound. So thank you, Chairman Pedroza, members of the board. My name is Rebecca Schenk. I am the program manager for public transit here at NVTA, and I'll be doing an introduction to our electric buses. For those who are in the room today or in the audience, I encourage you, if you haven't already before you leave, to go out and see our electric B bus in person, which is the vehicle that will be going into the town of Yountville. And for those who are not, we will include some pictures at the end to give you a sense of what we have here. But besides the very nice looking bus and all that comes with it, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background here in this presentation, and that we're going to see like how we got here, where we are in terms of getting them deployed, and what kind of our thought process was working with the Center for Transportation and the Environment to make them work for us in the future. So in terms of an update for the bus delivery, so 4 out of 5 buses have arrived in Napa of our total order. The 5th bus is still at BYD's facility in Lancaster, and kind of the reason for that is that bus, once it was complete, had to go to Altoona, PA, which is where the Federal Transit Administration does their testing on their buses. It passed their test, so now it made it back to BYD, and it's getting its basically its cover and being painted, and then it will be up to us. And we expect that probably by the end of the month of May. In terms of chargers, we have 2 chargers right now available at our Jackson Street facility, which is our current maintenance yard, and the installations of chargers in Yountville and St. Helena is ongoing. The chargers have been installed in St. Helena. We're doing an adjustment to our encroachment permit because we need to do an upgrade to one of their electrical boxes to make those chargers work. And in Yountville, we poured the concrete basically for the pedestals that the chargers will go on. About a week and a half ago, that concrete will cure, and on the 23rd, coming up on Monday, we will start the installation of the 2 chargers in Yountville. So coming around on that front. But what really needs to happen before the buses can go into service is twofold, is training. So BYD has kind of a backlog on their training, but we don't want to put
We just lost audio.
We are having some technical issues in the boardroom. Can you all hear us online?
Can hear you, can't hear Rebecca.
Okay, thank you. We're replacing the mic. Give us a moment.
All right, there we go. So the thing about, I was talking about training, I think when I cut out, and before we get these buses on the road, we have to complete training through BYD of our drivers as well as our mechanics, because on the mechanical side of things, right, we don't want to have them out there, something to go awry and not be able to service them. So we are working hard to get dates from BYD and to get into their schedule. So as soon as we have those, we'd be ready on that front. And the other thing that we're waiting on is the fare box installation. So for example, in this case, we already owned some GenFare fare boxes that the plan was to install them on the vehicles once they arrived and the wiring was there. And that actually worked on some Eldorados that we recently got. But what we discovered whenever the BYDs were delivered in this case is because we had put in a driver barrier due to COVID, that doesn't fit well with our existing fare box. So BYD and their engineering team is working right now on either adjusting the driver barrier and or adjusting the wiring to put the fare box in a location further back in the bus. So kind of stay tuned for that. That wouldn't prevent us from starting service in Yountville. I guess there's only one impediment on that front, but it will stop us from the other 4. So that's kind of what we're working through now. And then kind of planning for service. How we got here is we did a lot of route modeling with the Center for Transportation and the Environment, and we were able to pay for their services through a low and no admissions grant that we had gotten for these buses and for this training. So we started with a series of assumptions, which you see on the board here for nominal and strenuous activities, right? We were looking at the weight of the bus, kind of an estimate of the number of occupants, and then the auxiliary load from things like, oh, you're charging your phone, right? We have ports for that. And then HVAC, because that is a really big pull on the battery. Luckily, we're in a relatively moderate climate, but still on a hot day in the city of St. Helena, we want to be prepared for the strenuous scenario. The other thing that we really needed to look at, and is in the fixed route service in Napa in particular, was, and what we learned was that some of the blocks that we were running, and a block is just so you have a route, right? And you have trips, and a block is what the vehicle's doing, basically, on the given route. And so some of those blocks were unachievable because they were too strenuous under conditions. So in kind of talking and working through the scenarios that I'm going to show you, CTE's recommendation is that we employ the BYD buses within the city of St. Helena on the route N, and then we return to the depot whenever we're at about a 23% state of charge so that we don't get stranded at any point in time. And so those were kind of the assumptions that we had going in. And now I'll just talk you through a few of the scenarios that we ran and a little bit about PG&E. So on the next slide, what you see is about the PG&E charging for the rate plan. And so it's a little different from what you see, say, when you get your electric bill, right? It's pretty much peak, off peak. And in this case, we have off peak and then some super off peak that's deployed. So in the column on the left-hand side, it basically shows the usage and the rates, including subscription charges, which are also kind of unique to this particular rate plan. If you have one charger, one CP250 in our case, and then if you have more than one charger, i.e. if you're using more than 100 kilowatt hours, your price schedule associated with that. So that played into all of the different scenarios I'm going to show you. So our scenarios, as outlined in the next slide, is basically if we had, using the 3 vehicles in the city of Napa, if we had one charger, if we had 2 charger with and without charger management, and then if we had basically, we're using 3 electric buses to do what 2 diesel vehicles had done before. So these are the scenarios that we ran. So under the first scenario with one CP250 on the next slide, it kind of looks like this, right? That the scenario is not viable for us because it basically takes a little over 4 hours to charge each of the buses. If we were running the route N, right, from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., roughly, which is what the blocks look like, we wouldn't be able to charge that third bus, right, till 7:56 a.m., and that bus needs to leave at 6 a.m. And then you'll see at the bottom, it looks at the off-peak, peak, and super off-peak rates that I showed. And so also in this scenario, we're starting charging at a peak time. And so this scenario we kind of threw out and is not viable. So then on the next slide, you'll see kind of a second scenario, right? And this is 2 CP250s and the 3 buses. So in this case, this is a better scenario for us. It's not an impossible scenario, so to speak. But what you will note is that the charging, as it stands again, is starting in that peak period. And so that's not something that we want in terms of pricing. So this is definitely not an optimal scenario. As you'll see on the next slide, because it was viable, we kind of ran, okay, what would it really cost us? And so kind of pay attention to the last line, right, which is the monthly dollars per mile. So about 65 cents per mile in the middle, 70 at the high, 37 at the low. And so we don't want to be at 70 cents per mile on a monthly basis. So just to give you some context, in our bills for CNG, so some of our buses run on natural gas, right? We're paying, even in last month, which is really a peak price point, 0.45, so 45 cents per mile on a monthly basis. So we don't want to be at 70. And even at diesel, it's kind of its all-time high right now. We're paying about 80 cents. So we want to try to do better than that in terms of our price per mile. So this scenario really didn't work. So we kind of went back on scenario 2 and okay, said, what would we have charge management? And so what is charge management? That just basically means that in that first scenario, someone's going in and plugging in the charger and the charger's starting right then, right? But in this scenario, basically the buses are plugged in and then the charger knows, okay, this is the time of day, this is the rate, and it tries to optimize the time in which it charges. And because of this, we are having a charge management system. And as you will see in this scenario, we can do with 2 chargers, we can end up doing all of our charging kind of in the off-peak time frame. And you'll see on the next page, it really gives us the opportunity to keep that all at that $37 per mile across all of our blocks. So that puts us in a better scenario. And then the third scenario that we ran was just looking in the scenario where we just have one charger. So what's possible with one charger and charge management? And if you remember, originally we couldn't make it work without charge management, but it looks like with charge management and one, we can make it work in that basically what would happen is we'd use 3 of our electric vehicles to do what 2 diesel buses had done before, but it also allows us to do some charging, some in the super off-peak, and then to focus the rest. We just catch a little bit of peak period at one point, but mostly in the off-peak. And then what it works out for us price-wise, if you remember, we were looking at 37 cents before, and what it shows us here on the next slide is that we basically average out to about 37 cents per mile. So this is another viable option for us. We'll be probably doing more of this scenario 3 at our current Jackson Street facility, and then that scenario 2 with charge management at our new Sheet Court facility. So thank you for that, because in a scenario where we're getting more electric buses, we have 2 more Proterras on order, we wouldn't be able to make it work at the Jackson Street facility. And so in conclusion on this, we are looking also, that kind of concludes the city of Napa, but then in the city of St. Helena and Yountville, we are able to do our existing on-demand service. We did some scenario building and modeling using our 2018 mileage, and we made some assumptions there. And on the next page, it'll show you that the keys on our charging front there is that we just need to make sure that we do take a charging break whenever the lunch relief driver comes through in St. Helena and in Yountville. So for that half hour, which we'll just say 45 minutes, right? Because they have to drive over to the charger, charge it for 30 minutes and drive back. That electric vehicle won't be used in that kind of lunch break scenario, in that one of our more standard vehicles would be used at that time so that we can charge a little bit midday, which will guarantee us that we will end at the end of the day with more than our 23% charge. In fact, quite more, but we want to always prepare for the worst scenario. So that's how it's going to work in St. Helena and Yountville. And so really, in conclusion, and same deal on the price point, right around averaging probably about the 37 cents per mile monthly. So we're in a good spot there. And here are all of our pretty pictures for those who don't get to go out and see that bus today. And so we'll be basically taking advantage of the time of use chargers from PG&E and then ensuring our availability to do both the on-demand routes and then ensuring the availability in the event of a charger being down, they'll be able to charge still by having 2 chargers in St. Helena and 2 in Yountville, even though we'll only at this point be using 1 at a time. And with that, I'll answer any electric bus questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Great presentation. And I think it's, for us, it's great to get behind these initiatives like electrifying our fleet, but then there's this back end infrastructure management that is so critical, as you just illustrated. And as someone that drives an electric car, that's phenomenal. I'm going to take notes of what you should be doing. But again, thank you for this. So directors, any question? Anyone in the board chambers have any questions for Rebecca? Vice Chair Alessio.
Thank you, Rebecca. This is really exciting on Earth Day. I got to go to the bee bus, and the bee is not like in the alphabet B. B is like in the flying pollinating insect bee. And it's really beautiful. And so, when I thought about it from both a resident standpoint and a visitor standpoint, I think it's going to draw more ridership. And very exciting that it really does address clean energy. I think that's going to also be very compelling for everybody to take advantage of this. So great work. Thank you for being so thoughtful, looking at the back end, as Chair Pedrosa said, and looking forward to more buses.
Yes, no, thank you. And on the pretty bus note, we will get a list to City of St. Helena and City of Yountville about trees that need trimmed, because we're going to ruin our wraps pretty early on if we don't take care of that.
Completely agree. All right, Director Joseph and then Director Garcia.
Yes, well, thank you for the report. And I guess my only concern is the scenario 3 sounds like we need to have 3 electric buses to do what 2 diesel used to. And just as a matter of optics, that kind of worries me. I hate to think that we've got to buy 50% more vehicles. So if we can make option 2, I guess it is, where we have two vehicles doing what two vehicles used to do, that seems like it's a better option financially as well. So for what it's worth, I hope you can make two work with charge management.
Yeah, I think we can definitely make scenario 2 work at the new facility. The tricky thing is just going to be at Jackson, because we're going to get these 2 other electric buses from Proterra before we're done over at She Court, which is kind of how we're trying to do that 3-to-1 ratio right now, without doing like major infrastructure upgrades at Jackson Street, which we're trying to avoid given that we'll be leaving there. So we did do an upgrade of the transformer from 15 kVA to just about 45. So that's like the extent of the investment we wanted to make. But as soon as we're at She Court, we'll be in this scenario 2.
Okay, good. Well, that makes sense then. It doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money on a facility you're going to leave soon. So
right, we wanted to get.
Yeah, it is exciting.
We wanted to get. Sorry, we just wanted to get the largest transformer we could get and still be on the pole and not have to ground mount it at Jackson, because the price tag on that was a little pricey.
Okay,
All right,
great.
Director Garcia.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. A very exciting proposition coming forward. What can you say on the price comparison for maintenance compared to a diesel and electric bus? And if there's a savings over time, then that probably can be applied toward the third bus in terms of accounting to come up even where we are. So what's the cost of maintaining a diesel maintenance versus an electric?
Yeah, I think I'll have a better answer in year 5. I mean, it's advertised it's going to be less expensive, right? In terms of you're not doing some of those initial oil changes and things. But then you've got kind of the battery degradation side of things in terms of the maintenance of the battery and trying to keep that up. So look for a report later to find out like the reality of that. But in theory, we think that we are going to save on maintenance, and hopefully that will be helpful because the upfront capital cost is much more expensive.
I just starting out my first career as an aircraft mechanic on reciprocating engines, equal to what automobiles are. It's just there's so many things in a petroleum-powered vehicle that break down or need maintenance. I think there's far less components in the electric vehicle. So I think over a long run, it's probably speaks to better economics. You're having less. I'm assuming on staff, it'll prove you need less mechanic attention. So I look forward to that. It just makes, in one sense, makes economic sense. Environmentally, it makes another sense too. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Garcia. And then just some of the initial findings on just regular autos is that you do save on the maintenance, right? So that's something that we can look forward to as an indicator of what we might expect. But again, I do like that check-in in the future just so we can verify that. All right, I don't see any other directors with questions. Laura, do we have it? Oh, go Joe.
Thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. Yountville is looking forward to that bus arriving. Reliability on the current fleet hasn't been great, so we're looking for something that's going to be infinitely more reliable and certainly much more aesthetically pleasing and clean. It's a win for Yountville for sure. So really excited to get that into the fleet. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director Tagliabashi. Laura, do we have any member of the public?
We do not.
All right. At this point, Rebecca, thank you very much. We're going to proceed to item 8.2, Oxbow Book of Poetry.
Yes, so a little something different and a little less technical. So I'm going to present on the Oxbow Book of Poetry. And so the initial idea for this, and if you're physically here in the room, you're going to leave with Oxbow books today. And if you're not, we'll go ahead and send them to you. They were designed by our new public information officer, Valerie Walston, and they're quite beautiful. So it'll become something kind of fun to leave with. So the Oxbow School had contacted Antonio Adorado in our office and then worked with myself and Director Miller. And she had an idea, right, as the teacher of the class at Oxbow, that we'd be able to kind of based on a poetry in motion series that she had seen when she was living in New York City, which basically brings public art to the subway system in that case, that she wanted to bring some public art to our buses. And so we worked with Oxbow, and they kind of go by semesters. So semester 45. And they went ahead and they were tasked with creating their own visual poems that were informed by living and learning at art school in Napa Valley. And so on the screen in front of you here on the next page, you will see a series of some of the poems that we received. And so we got a total of 26 poems. And on the next page, you'll see them displayed on our buses. And so it was just something different to be able to see and to read on your commute. So we have a lot of, don't smoke, carb warnings, earthquake evacuation zone information. But in these times, you got to see something, kind of much more enlightening, and hopefully enjoyed your ride. So each page in the book has a page of the poems that we've had in the buses for the last few months now. And we also presented these to the Oxbow School to thank them for all their work. They're kind of in the middle finals, so they weren't able to come today. But take a look before you leave.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Any questions, directors? I don't see anyone in the board chambers, or do we have anyone online?
We do not. Oh, wait, we do have one hand raised. I apologize. Director Ellsworth, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for sharing this. I just want to say that I think it's just really remarkable, wonderful way to sort of tie our community together for the young people here participating to see their work shared throughout the community. And then for, the adults in the community to see the tie-in with the younger people here and their thoughts. And it's a great project. And it may seem, I know, as an artist myself, a lot of times people look at art as superfluous or the idea of poetry, but it actually is a way for us to help direct the future that may not be as specific as engineering, so to speak, but those thoughts and the expression of them helps us, share who we are as humans, et cetera, and where we're moving as a community. So I think this is a great project and just really terrific to see. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Director Ellsworth. And when you read the 26, you'll get a sense of the impact of isolation and things that happened, I think, to these children, or I shouldn't say children, young adults during COVID. So it was very insightful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Director Ellsworth. All right, we're going to proceed to our consent agenda items. We have a few items on consent, directors.
We had one quick question by Director Kraus as to where the books are located. Sorry, Rebecca.
So for those in the boardroom today, they are here. Otherwise, we're going to mail them to you. The house, I think, is the plan. Yeah.
We're going to make
Okay.
sure you get your book.
We're going to get you a book.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Let's
you.
proceed with our consent agenda items. We have a few items on consent. Directors, any questions on our consent items? I don't see anyone in the board chambers. I don't see anyone online, Laura. Do we have any public comment on our consent items?
We do not.
All right, directors, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved, Canning.
Canning,
Second by Alessio.
second by Alessio. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus, I
Yes.
see you, Gary. Thank you. Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. Let's proceed to our regular items now, directors. Our first item is 10.1. This is a chair, vice chair nominating committee for fiscal year 22-23. This is found on page 38 and 40. I am super excited about this item. So our term as chair and vice chair ends this June. And that is, as it is the normal practice, we nominate 3 individuals to be on the committee. Past practice has been the current chair and some past chairs serve on that committee. So I would like to nominate Director Dunbar as past chair and Director Canning as past chair, along with myself, to serve on this committee. That will come back at our next meeting with a recommendation for chair and vice chair. Directors, any questions? Vice Chair Alessio.
I was just going to second that motion.
Perfect. All right. Let me see if there's any public comment, Laura.
There is not.
All right. And I'm not going to ask for consensus from Director Dunbar or Canning. It's part of our tradition as past chair. So we have a motion on the floor where myself, Director Dunbar, Director Canning will serve as the subcommittee looking at our chair and vice chair, seconded by Vice Chair Alessio. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph, Mark Joseph.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris Canning,
Reluctantly, yes.
Gary Kraus,
Enthusiastically, yes.
Liz Alessio. Scott Sedgley,
I guess so.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Absolutely.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I expected you all to be a little bit more excited to get rid of me. All right, so let's move on to item 10.2. This is resolution 22-15, adoption of the Napa Valley Transportation Authority biannual budget for the fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24. Antonia's going to present this item. This is found on page 41 to 59. Take it away.
So thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Antonio Honorado, and I am the Director of Finance here for the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. So for this item, staff is asking the board to formally adopt by resolution NVTA's fiscal year 22-23 annual consolidated budget of $75,111,800 and approve the fiscal year 23 appropriation limit of the same amount, and also the fiscal year 23-24 NVTA's consolidated annual budget of $36,283,900 and approve the fiscal year 24 appropriation limit of the same amount as well. So as you recall, at the last board meeting, there was a public hearing and first reading which presented the preliminary budgets for the next 2 fiscal years. The budgets were presented in 4 distinct elements: the Congestion Management Agency budget, the Public Transit Fund budget, the Capital Improvement budget, and a budgetary amount for depreciation expense. The table of those amounts are in the memo and detailed in attachment 1. Since the first reading, 2 revisions were made. The first change is for the improvements at the Sausville Gateway Transit Center upper floor office acoustical partitioning and ground floor office suite build out. The budget has been reduced from $3 million to $860,000 for interim improvements. So based on director's comments at the April meeting, staff has evaluated and is proposing a phased approach to modify the transit center's offices areas on both the upper floor and ground floor. The $860,000 includes acoustical upgrades to cubicles on the upper floor, and for the ground floor, construct 2 offices, a wellness room, and a restroom shower facility. The proposal will will nominally provide essential post-pandemic meeting requirements to accommodate existing FTEs, growing families, and summer interns. Phase 2 will be considered in a future budget and will include completing the first floor and reconfiguring the second floor to convert cubicles into offices. The second revision is to add an additional 2 vehicles to the capital budget, the capital investment budget. As you have already heard from the executive director, we've been selected to receive 4 medium-sized buses, 2 to replace Calistoga and 2 additional paratransit type vehicles. The Calistoga buses were already included in the original preliminary budget, and we just did a little bit of a bump up to include those 2 extra vehicles. And that was about $160,000 added to the budget for that adjustment. Except for some very minor incremental adjustments, other than budgetary items that were presented last month, they did not change. So that concludes my report. Just to recap, staff is asking the board to approve NVTA's biannual budget for the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Antonio. Great presentation. Directors, any initial questions? I don't see anyone in the board chambers. Oh, Vice Chair Alessio.
Thank you for the presentation. Just to confirm, if I'm understanding correctly, the the part of the budget that the board was expressing some, not really concern, but maybe some concern at the last meeting for the first reading was regarding the upgrades at the transit center recommended by the executive director. And that was originally a $3 million budget. And now it's an $860,000 budget. Is that correct?
Well, it's going to be phased, and the 860,000 is for the first phase.
Okay.
So the $3 million was originally a placeholder. We didn't have a lot of information from our consultants, so we put in a budgetary placeholder. Now we have a little bit better information, but we are proposing a phased approach. With the first phase is 860,000, and is for the list of items that I indicated in my report.
Thank you. I want to thank our executive director and staff for listening to the board and working with that and making that and moving forward in such a mindful way. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Director Dunbar.
Well, follow up on that question. So am I to understand that it's not reducing the actual budget, that it's still going to be ultimately a $3 million project, but you're only putting $800 and some thousand in it in this fiscal cycle? Is that correct?
Director Dunbar, this is just the first phase of the project and the only thing that the board would be approving as part of a budgetary action today. It will come back to you in the future. And this is just to address the interim needs that we have right now to accommodate young families, people. We have several staff with autoimmune problems. We don't have a wellness room. And we have the second floor is just too packed with people in this environment right now. So those are the things that are essential for moving forward. And that is the only action the board is going to be taking today.
So the concerns about privacy in working in either open air or cubicles without total privacy, that is going to be phased in over time. Is that what you're saying?
We are going to be doing some work to make it more quiet between cubicles so participate on remote meetings, but we're not. I mean, the initial plan was to actually completely reorganize the second floor so that it would accommodate offices, or the second floor. But now we're not doing that. We're just doing some noise canceling kind of improvements on the second floor, and then building out the first floor so that there's a wellness room, 2 offices, so that people can do meetings remotely. They won't be assigned to anybody in particular. And then also a restroom on the first floor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Dunbar. I don't see any other questions from directors, or do we have any members of the public?
We do not.
All right, I'll bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion for approval. This is an action item.
So moved, Kraus.
First by Kraus,
Second, Garcia.
second by Garcia. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus, Gary Kraus? I see
Yes.
you. I can't. Thank you. Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedroza.
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliaboschi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you all. Let's proceed to 10.3. Delegated authority to Napa Valley Transportation Authority, Policy Manual, Chapter 5, Contracting and Procurement Policy. Antonia's going to present, found on pages 60 through 162. Take it away.
Yeah, so for this item, staff is asking the board to amend the procurement and contracting policy to be compliant with government code. So back at the March 16th, 2022 Board of Directors meeting, the executive director was granted newly delegated procurement authority powers and amounts. After an enhanced legal review, it has come to staff's attention that some of those delegated authority amounts are in conflict with state regulations and the code governing joint powers agencies. So there are 2 areas that we're asking for the board to amend. The delegated authority allowing for non-construction purchases of up to $100,000 will be pared down to $66,141,000 with automatic yearly adjustments. The impetus of this decrease was because the incorrect consumer price index was used in calculating the adjustment. Staff customarily uses the Bay Area CPI for the calculation methodology for other calculations. We come to find out that I needed to use the CPI from the Department of Industrial Relations, which has a smaller annual CPI adjustment annual increase. So using the Department of Industrial Relations CPI calculation, the new corrected delegated authority amount is $66,141. The authority will be adjusted automatically when new ratios become available. The second revision was in the area for change orders. So back in March, the executive director was also granted change order authority above and beyond the initial change order authority amount at the time of the contract's approval. Since the board only meets monthly, the purpose of this was to allow the many projects in NVA's pipeline to progress efficiently and seamlessly without the need of having a special board meeting if a change order went slightly above the original granted authority amount. However, it has come to staff's attention that the newly granted change order authority violates government code. As such, change order authority can only be granted at the initial contract approval or by having another board meeting. Although this can impede a project's progress, staff will do anything in its power to ensure that any change orders are presented to the board in a timely manner and as not to impede a project's progress. This will obviously have to be monitored carefully, and any change order items will be presented to the board at the appropriate time. There were actually no other revisions to the policy. These were the only two changes we're asking the board to reconsider and to amend. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Chair Pedrosa, can I just make a couple of clarifying comments? First, I didn't act on the adjusted authority between March and now, so we're good. The other comment that I wanted to make is that when we request that you authorize a contract, there is a certain limit to that contract plus the contingency. So the change orders would be any change orders that exceed the original amount. So that is the number that Antonio is speaking about.
Any questions, directors? I don't see any in the boardroom. Do we have anyone virtually?
Director Joseph.
Director Joseph, go ahead.
Just to clarify then, that 66,000 is basically the inflation adjusted number. Will that be an automatic? So next year it'll be 67 or whatever, or do we need to manually adjust it every year or something?
No, it'll be automatically adjusted based on the CPI from the Department of Industrial Relations when they come out with new percentages.
Okay, thank you.
So it's automatic.
Right.
All right, thank you, Director Joseph. I don't see any other directors with any questions. Laura, do we have any members of the public?
We do not.
All right, bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion if there's no further discussion.
So moved.
So moved, Canning.
First by Canning, second by Joseph. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus,
Yes.
Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedrosa,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, directors. Let's proceed to item 10.4. This is Amendment 7 to the Napa Valley Transportation Authority Agreement number 1208 for the position of Executive Director. A reminder, directors, you delegated that authority to Vice Chair Leslie and I to meet with our Executive Director. And as soon as we have a motion, I will turn over to council to read the appropriate disclaimer. If there's no questions, directors, I will look for a motion. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a second by Vice Chair Leslie.
To approve?
Yes, so that was a motion to approve by myself and second by Vice Chair Alessio. At this point, I'm going to ask council to provide the appropriate disclosure.
A motion has been made and seconded regarding the modification of an existing employment agreement with Kate Miller, Executive Director of Napa Valley Transportation Authority. In accordance with the Executive Director's employment agreement, the board may consider adjustments to the Executive Director's salary that are applicable in January each year. Pursuant to Government Code 54953C, a summary of compensation must be orally reported prior to taking final action. Pursuant to the proposed modification of her current employment agreement with the board, Ms. Miller is to receive an annual salary of $243,921. All other terms of the employment agreement shall remain the same. A copy of the amendment to the employment agreement will be made available once all parties have signed the amendment.
Thank you, council. And that is part of the process. We do have to make those public disclosures. So we have a motion on the floor. Any questions, directors? I don't see any questions from directors in the chambers. At this point, I'll see if there's any member of the public that wishes to make public comment on this item.
No public comment.
All right, bring it back to the board and I will proceed with Director Dunbar.
It looks like, oh, you've caught it.
For the directors, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand, we're just having some technical difficulties. So just if you could raise your hand, not virtually, but on the Zoom, it would be very helpful. Go ahead, Director Dunbar.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that the salary adjustments effective January 1, 2022, I think that's appropriate to call out to recognize the performance that we are acknowledging with the executive director.
All right. And I'll just say, it was a great discussion that we had as a board and to our staff. We look at how unique Napa County is, the workload that we take on, and a lot of the accomplishments we've reached as a team. And we want to thank Director Miller for her leadership in a very difficult time going through the pandemic, having to work and still deliver on outcomes, I think should be acknowledged and rewarded. So let's proceed with a roll call vote.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus,
Yes.
Liz Alessio,
Yes, with a thank you to Executive Director Miller.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Ditto and thank you. Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes, and I'll also echo that. Thank you.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Congratulations, Director Miller. Let's proceed to item 10.5. This is the Napa Valley Transportation Authority fiscal year 21-22 Q3 financial review and delegated authority matrix. Roxanne is going to take it away. This is found on page 168 to 184.
Good afternoon. My name is Roxana Marati, Senior Financial Analyst. And we have a PowerPoint.
One moment while I pull that up.
Thank you.
And Roxanne, if you can just make sure your mic is on, there should be some type of light. Okay,
I'll speak louder.
it's all right.
All right. This slide is a summary of the financial performance for Q3. And just to clarify, when I say Q3, that's the third quarter of the current fiscal year 21-22. The memo attached has specific information for various line items. As you can see, the CMA is performing under the 75% typical rate for Q3 or par rate, but this is in part due to timing issues, mostly due to discretionary funds and carryover. With the budget adjustment removed from the carryover, the budget would be almost fully expended. So just to note that. The Public Transit Fund is performing as expected and is anticipated that budgets will be expended by year end. And lastly, the capital budget was fully loaded with each project's total cost, which is why there is smaller budget utilization of 8%. And also some projects were delayed. The bus maintenance facility and and Emola Park and Ride had activity in Q3, but most will occur or be paid for in Q4 and beyond. The Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga segment construction also has not started yet. By year end, staff expects capital expenditures to be closer to $10 million. Next slide, please. This slide represents the CMA or general fund. As of Q3, TDA made up most of the revenues received, but TDA is received upfront and helps the agency operate until grant reimbursements can be drawn down based on actual expenditures. By year end, staff expects the other sources of revenue to increase. State and regional sources include reimbursements for Saskell Junction, TFCA chargebacks, and Measure T 1% chargebacks. Federal revenues include OBAG CMA planning grant reimbursements, and other governmental revenues include JPA membership fees and Measure T chargebacks for audits. Other revenues include interfund transfers and interest. Moving on to expenditures. CMA slides. Thank you. The largest expense category for the CMA was consulting services in relation to Saskell Junction, the Vine Trail design, and State Route 29 design improvements. Personnel costs made up the second largest category. The agency currently has 2 vacancies and will remain under budget in this category by year end. Administration expenses accounted for 18% by Q3 and include the regular services and supplies it takes to run the agency. Next slide, please. TDA and federal funds are the largest shares of revenues on the left pie chart, making up 85% of revenues when combined. Federal funds consist of stimulus funds that have been drawn down thus far. Farebox totaled $412,000 by Q3, or 4% of all revenues received. Compared to last year, as a reference, compared to last year at Q3, Farebox performance has increased by 30%. So that's good news. State and regional funding is comprised of regional Measure 2 funding and state transit assistance. And other revenues include ancillary revenues, interest, and other I cannot talk, other items, small items that are too technical. Public transit expenses, the largest share of expenses, as you know, was purchase transportation costs or TransDev operations costs, making about 3/4 of the public transit fund's expenses. The second highest expense is fuel, maintenance, and insurance. Fuel is above budget due to rising fuel prices, as you know. Q3 fuel costs were almost $100,000 higher than Q1 as a reference. It is anticipated that fuel will exceed this line item budget, but there are savings within the public transit fund to make up for this overage. The majority of the new computer-aided dispatch and automatic vehicle locator system, also known as CAD-AVL, installation, licensing costs occurred in Q3. Additionally, there have been some software maintenance costs associated with the on-demand app. Personnel represents staff charges specifically to public transit activities, and administration represents other operational costs such as printing, banking, and utility costs. That includes my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Roxanna. Is this your first presentation?
Yeah, but it's really warm.
No. I say that as a welcome.
Yeah, thank you. No, actually, I presented before via Zoom.
Okay, so,
yeah,
but in person.
In person, yeah.
We're all getting reacquainted with each other, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Directors, any questions? I don't see it in the boardroom. Let me go to virtually. I don't see any questions from directors virtually. Laura, do we have any members of the public that wish to provide public comment?
We do not.
All right. So I'll bring it back to the board, and I believe this was not an action item. This was just to receive the report.
Yes.
All right, Roxanna, you're off the hook.
All right.
Thank you very much. Let's proceed with 10.6. This is the Vine Transit update. Rebecca is up. This is found on page 185 to 192.
Hello again, Chairman Pedroza and members of the board. This will also be an informational item, and I'll be presenting also on the third quarter. As Roxana reminded us, that is from January of 2022 through March of 2022. So basically it'll show what we did in the transit side with the budget that we expended. And so moving on to the first slide, and you'll see this is more in our traditional background. Libby and I had completed this prior to the new background that we're working on. And it shows our historical kind of local service. So City of Napa service, passengers per revenue hour on the weekdays. And so you'll see through the last few quarters that we have, and compared to the third quarter of last year, increased from just over 2 passengers per revenue hour to just over 5 passengers per revenue hour. And you also saw that reflected in the financials that you heard in terms of fare box. So we are increasing, but still well below kind of our passengers per revenue hour, which had initially been, and our minimum threshold had been 8. But I want to call your attention to the next slide that really breaks down the local service in the city of Napa by the routes and passengers per revenue hour. So you'll see on our fixed routes, which are the N, S, W, and E, that we are now above, in this last quarter, the 8 passengers per revenue hour. What pulls down our overall local passengers per revenue hour is operating the Vine on demand service. And so it's just in a way, a nature of that service, right? And that you are going exactly where people in a way need to go and when they don't have fixed route available. And so by the nature of that service, our passengers per revenue hour there is low. I think that if we would say have a goal, and maybe we'll start to divide these out, we'll have to talk through it internally. But if we were maybe to have a goal for Vine on demand, it might be more like a 4 passenger per revenue hour, more like what we'll see when we look at American Canyon or St. Helena or Calistoga later in terms of their passenger per revenue hour. But I just did want to break down that distinction that we are in our fixed routes performing quite well on a passenger per revenue hour level, but Vine on demand, by the nature of that service, is significantly lower. So moving on to our next slide, which shows our regional service, and it shows our passengers per revenue hour. So we are on the routes 10 and 11, right below the 8 that you had seen on that north, south, east, and west, and just about over 6 and about 7 passengers per revenue on our route 10 and 11, due to the much longer routes on the route 11X, 21, and 29, and not the same return of commute riders. We are still at a very low passenger per revenue hour of under 4. On the next slide, what you're going to see is kind of looking at our total ridership change. So I used to just go back 1 quarter and 1 year, but as you'll see now, we're going back kind of 2 years to try to capture that pre-COVID level. So what you'll see is in the yellow is our pre-COVID level in terms of total number of passengers, and then all the way to the right in the orange is the latest quarter. And the local on demand on the route 11, in particular, we are performing better than we had in the prior quarter. And then we're doing about the same on things like the route 10, the route 29, and slightly lower compared quarter to quarter on the route 29 in particular. And so what do I see here? I see January and February of the pandemic, because if you look at our March numbers, if I just was going to show March, say, as the orange next to the gray, I would see increases in all of the categories. But people have been responding to the different waves in COVID. And so our ridership in particular in January and February was significantly lower than it was in March. So I think that's what you are seeing here. And then this covers our fixed routes. But on the next slide, what you're going to see is more of the ridership chains related to Vine Go, which are ADA paratransit, Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, and American Canyon. And so we did see increases compared to the last quarter in American Canyon, Yountville, and St. Helena, a slight dip in Calistoga, which we kind of expect kind of their quiet tourist season in addition to COVID it tends to be that January to February timeframe. And we do rely on many tourists who take the shuttle in Calistoga. I'll be very excited, for example, to see, particularly in St. Helena, what happens once we put the electric bus out there. If you've ever seen our bus in St. Helena right now, it's a white nondescript vehicle with a number in purple, which could be anything. So I think we'll have, I don't understand all of the aspects of branding, but I feel like this will be more of an attractor. Yountville had while not always functional, lift wise, I had a very nice looking trolley. So I don't expect to see the same jump there, but I think particularly on the St. Helena shuttle, and kind of we'll present something to you which kind of shows a new brand related to the butterfly bus that'll be in St. Helena, and we'll work with the chamber there. So I expect to see that they'll be like, oh, this is the day, right? Almost. And you'll be able to see that jump hopefully. And on the Vine Go front, right, that's just always is our most vulnerable population. And so we didn't see them a lot in January and February, but they did start venturing out in March. And I've had many conversations with people recently, like, oh, I used to ride in 2020, and they call me. So we've had a lot of new registrants or recertifications. And then on our last couple slides here, I just want to talk about kind of potential upcoming changes. So it's kind of in a way fun to plan them and not it just to be as a result of something related to COVID. So we expect around June 19th that we would do a schedule change, basically because school will be letting out. So we won't run the American Canyon and St. Helena school trips. The Route E, we will change the timing of the morning trip and the afternoon trip because Camille Creek Community School, which that route serves, has different summer hours than they do the rest of the school year. So we'll adjust it to accommodate those. And then the Route 11 and 21, we will be working to kind of change the time points for better on-time performance, always trying to make that fluctuate in terms of traffic and existing conditions. And then we're not going to do the 4:30 a.m. trip on the Route 29 due to low ridership, but we do have a 5 a.m. trip. So there is still quite an early morning option that will be into the Bay Area. So that would be in August or in June. And then in August, when school starts back up, we're looking to make a few changes. Some as a result of school, and then others because we think the Amola Park and Ride will be up and ready. And so we would stop the Route 29 and 11X no longer here, but over at the Amola Park and Ride to kind of streamline that service along State Route 29. And that would also mean that the 11X would no longer be stopping at the Napa Valley College. They would be using, say, the 11 to get to the college, because just geographically, if we use the Amola Park and Ride, we wouldn't be able to make that Napa Valley College stop. And then we'd bring back the shuttles that we weren't running during the summer, and we would reinstate the E right to coordinate with the Camille Creek schedule. And then we would look at a bi-directional Route W. Route W goes over and goes along basically the first street and then goes out, excuse me, can't think of it. Anyway, goes out, crosses over the highway, goes through the Westwood neighborhood, and then returns on Old Sonoma. And so that's really a one directional route. So it works fine if you kind of live at the midpoint at Laurel, but if you live on either end, right, the one directional route doesn't serve you well. So we're hoping to turn that route into a bi-directional route and working with Silverado Middle School to potentially add to that as a service location, because we have had a lot of ridership in the past at Harvest Middle School with that middle school closing and those children being reassigned either to Silverado Middle School or up to Redwood. We'd look to have service to Silverado Middle School for those living in Westwood. And with that, the fun thing coming up is to rock a free ride to Bottle Rock. As our executive director mentioned in her opening report, we'll be offering free service again on Friday through Sunday, and we'll make sure no one's left behind at the end of the concert. So if you're looking to ride, look on our website for all of the details, but basically we'll be running into the evening and all day on Sunday to serve those riders. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Rebecca, for that succinct presentation. And just a reminder on the Bottle Rock shuttles, is that a partnership with Latitude 38, the promoters?
It is, yes.
Wonderful.
And they help us offset that cost. So even if you're just riding the 29 to go to work like you would any day on that Friday, as a result of Bottle Rock being in town, that ride would be free to you that day.
That's great. It's always great to acknowledge those kind of private-public partnerships and folks doing good things in the community. So, directors, any questions? Vice Chair Alessio.
Thank you for the presentation, Rebecca. A couple questions are, how do we compare to other jurisdictions in the Bay Area in terms of return of ridership?
Yes, and we'll have to do, we had done it, I think, a few quarters ago to show you exactly kind of relative to all of the other operators. And we had kind of come back, that was in the December timeframe, and we were trending slightly above the Bay Area as a whole. And I kind of just anecdotally, when we meet with them, we meet with the small operators, I think that that would still be the case. So kind of overall, we've all been trending down, right? But our return has been slightly greater, I think, than the overall. And we can get you that official MTC numbers in the next quarterly report.
And Vice Chair Alessio, what I would share, it's just, it all depends by region, right? Some regions where they return to work a little quicker, they saw an increase. Some regions where they had choice riders, those that could afford to get in the car, it had different impacts. So it's hard to do that comparison because it's so specific to the jobs, to the income, to equity.
Sure.
But I think it'd be good to take more of a global perspective and present it to how it compares to us locally.
Yeah, try to find that middle, right? You're not going to be able to, maybe with the ferry, that's kind of a whole different audience and a whole different situation. But yeah, I think if we kind of pull them all together.
I have another. I got. Oops. Am I good? Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, I was kind of thinking along the lines of, it'd be interesting too. We don't need to do this, but my own mind, how COVID directly and indirectly has impacted our local ridership, both in terms of the spikes that we received here in the area and the mitigations that followed, and how that aligns with, the return, because it's not quite as a crazy ride, but we still have seen increases and decreases and people being more protective, especially, again, right now. So the other question I have is, how are we doing on wait times? Are you monitoring that?
Yeah, we're monitoring in terms of on demand at the city of Napa. So if you remember, in November, we made some changes because our wait times were getting quite long, right? We were trying to aim for around 10 minutes in terms of your wait time. So what we did at that point was we instituted kind of a no-show policy to say that if you were allowed to still cancel your ride, but if you were a no-show, i.e. the bus came to pick you up and you had made that reservation and you were not there, that if you had a certain number of strikes, then we would, kind of warn you about that. We never had to move to the point of restricting any riders, but I think just having that message out there and letting them know that we were monitoring that helped. And then using the app, we didn't allow people who could have taken the route N, let's just say from the high school to here, to take on demand. And we were trying to reserve on demand for the others. And so we were able to bring that down from where we had been like at 15 minutes to more in the 10 to 12 minute range. So when I look at it each morning, I get like the little updates and it shows me, I'm like, oh, we're in 10 to 12. I'm feeling good about it. So it's not something that's, feeling abnormal right now. So I don't think we have to take any further action on that.
Thank you. And then my last question is regarding VineGo. So we know that we have a high need for our more vulnerable population, and that Molly's Angels they're at their capacity, and they're trying to strategize how they can increase capacity. It's surprising to me that our ridership, even though they are vulnerable in COVID, but we're still seeing the pressure on Molly's Angels. I'm wondering why we're not seeing that on NVTA for VineGo, what our capacity is, and are we meeting capacity? Is there a wait list, or we have rides that are available that people don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's hard to say how people make different sets of choices. What I will say, though, is that while people were more in, say, the January and February timeframe, we were doing like maybe 300 to 400 VineGo trips, that when we came March, in a way, the door opened and we were like at plus 700 in a way. So people did start to see in March maybe that our doors were more open. And I think we need to emphasize, because we do have a little bit more capacity, I think, still within our system, that we're not maybe like Molly's Angels, where we're at the point of, we don't know what to do. So we're not at the point where we're rejecting rides. I wouldn't call like now for the next hour, but if you were doing your normal kind of 7-day thing, we'd still have that capacity. So I think part of it will just be if COVID rates remain low, I think people will feel comfortable taking a shared ride with us. And then maybe just educating people that it's not as though you're going to suddenly take a trip with 6 of your best friends, say, or however it might be. And that that because our ridership is still not so high, that you might get maybe 2 or 3 people on your trip, and maybe trying to get that message out, and that they're also in a vulnerable position. So they're trying to be as careful as possible.
Thank you for that.
And I would just add that it's a different ridership. And Molly's Angels is not geographically constrained to a certain operating area, and we are. We tend to accommodate more frail riders, I think, than Molly Angels can. And so it's a little bit different, but yeah, I appreciate your comment.
Right. Don't see anyone else in the board chambers. Directors, anyone online? I don't see anyone. Laura, do we have any public comment on this item?
We do. Justin, go ahead.
So, Becca, the date for back to school is August the 18th, August 15th, I think.
Yes, so we always have to change schedules on a Sunday, just like logistically and how it works in our CAT AVL system. So we'll change it probably a little early. We'll change it the Sunday before. And right, we'll operate then inevitably kind of empty buses on that Monday, Tuesday in anticipation of the Wednesday. But no, thanks. We have that date in mind and we'll stick to it. We'll be ready for service on that day.
All right.
And there's the new, so the new schedule will be starting up pretty soon.
Oh, you said the new Silverado kids?
No, the bus schedule, all the bus schedule.
Oh, new bus schedule. Yes, we're looking at around June 19th. We'll get you an official date on that, but there's just kind of small tweaks at that point in time. And then the big things would be in August with the Amola Park and Ride change, and hopefully with a bi-directional Route W.
Thank you,
All
Becca.
right.
Sure.
Thank you, Justin. Or do we have anyone else?
We do not.
All right, this was just a report. Rebecca, thank you very much. We're going to proceed to item 10.7. This is a one Bay Area grant cycle OBAG 3 call for projects. I see Alberto listed, but I see Danielle approaching.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Pedroza, members of the board, Danielle Schmitz filling in for Alberto Esqueda this afternoon. Here to present item 10.7, the One Bay Area Grant Cycle 3 call for projects. The action before the board today is to open the Napa County call for projects for OBAG 3 and adopt related materials, including the OBAG 3 application and evaluation criteria. The Metropolitan Transportation Commission adopted the OBAG 3 guidelines and funding targets for each of the counties in March of 2022. The OBAG program establishes the framework and policies to invest federal dollars under the Surface Transportation Program and the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Improvement Program. The idea behind OBAG is to invest federal transportation dollars in places close to housing, especially affordable housing, so to bolster alternative transportation modes. Funding for Napa County call for projects is $6.143 million. And applications are due to staff on June 17th after the board approves this call. NVTA will review the projects and present a prioritized list to the Technical Advisory Committee and then forward the recommendations to the NVTA board in July. And a little bit different than OBAG 2, this time around, there'll be a regional evaluation process. So MTC will review the projects that are submitted by the local county agencies and do a regional prioritization and review. And that is a result of an FHWA audit finding. It should be noted that NVTA has already committed 4.2 million of the roughly 6 million to 3 separate projects, one in the city of Napa, one in American Canyon, and one in St. Helena. Because of earlier funding commitments that were entered into for the construction of the Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga project. But once project applications are received and reviewed by NVTA staff and approved by the board, we will submit to MTC for prioritization. Eligible projects can be transportation, capital, or planning projects that fit a myriad of categories from active transportation, transit, community choice projects. Non-eligible projects include non-exempt air quality projects, new roadways, expansion projects, right-of-way acquisition for future expansion, operations, and routine local streets and roads maintenance, which was a former category under OBAG 2 and the original OBAG, so that should be noted. 50% of the funds in Napa County have to be spent in proximate access to a priority development area. There's 2 priority development areas in Napa County. One we are in currently. It's the City of Napa, Sausco Gateway, downtown Napa area, and the other is the Broadway area around American Canyon that parallels State Route 29. Projects will be given local priority that are within or proximate to a PDA, within or proximate to a priority conservation area or an equity priority community, which we identified several of in our last community-based transportation plan. Once the projects are submitted, MTC will approve the projects. The commission will approve the projects in the fall timeframe, and projects can begin in fiscal year 22-23, which will line up nicely with the timing for the 3 committed projects by this agency. So we will not lose any time moving them to OBAG 3. The action before the board today is to release the call for projects and adopt the application and evaluation criteria. And that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Danielle. Directors, any questions? I don't see any in the boardrooms. Director Ellsworth.
Thank you. First, I do want to say thank you for circling back on this and making sure the St. Helena project is in there, and also seeing Napa and American Canyon, those designations, designated spots for the funds to go. So I just want to make sure to recognize that and have appreciation for that. So in terms of what's available for other new projects, just so I think it's a great opportunity again for us all to keep working together at how to systemically benefit the area. What is the process for identifying where else? Do you want to hear from us separately, or do you want to hear from us in a meeting? What's the best way to put our support or our thoughts forward?
For each of the jurisdictions, yes. I mean, I would like to hear from your technical advisory committee, or are you talking about the board level or from a jurisdiction?
Well, just in general, if we've
Yeah.
got a certain amount of funds that are available, what's the
Right.
best way that we can all work together to make sure they go to the most important projects?
So if you look at the application, we do, so first of all, I would say there is limited additional funding beyond the 3 projects that we've already committed to from the agency. And if you look at the application, there are projects that we have to prioritize. These funds are really for priority development area locations, and really identifying where transportation investments would best be served in proximity to housing. And those are criteria that were layered on there by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So we haven't changed too much locally about the evaluation and prioritization criteria. I would like to hear from each jurisdiction what your priority projects are. So I do encourage each jurisdiction to submit a project, just because we have seen in the last 4 years these fire drills that come down the pipeline of we have this quick strike funding, or we have the CRISA funding. And so it really helps staff prioritize projects when we have an idea of what local priorities are as well. So take a look at the application, look at what projects your jurisdiction has that would fit the criteria that MTC is going to weigh heavily on, which is this project in a priority development area? Is it, a safe routes to school project? Is it a, community choice project that has been publicly vetted and has a lot of community support? Those are the things that they're going to be looking at in their evaluation, on top of the evaluation that Napa County does.
Thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other directors. Laura, do we have any members of the public?
We do not.
All right, I'll bring it back to the board. Look for a motion.
Move to approve, Garcia.
First by Garcia,
Second, Joseph.
second Joseph. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus,
Yes.
Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, Danielle. Let's proceed to our last item. This is 10.8, federal and state legislative update. Director Miller will take it away, found on page 200 to 226.
Thank you so much. On the federal side, the Department of Transportation is beginning to release a number of the funding or notices of funding opportunities or NOFOs related to the bipartisan infrastructure law. They include a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, bridge investment program, strengthening mobility and revolutionizing transportation grant program, and that program in particular is of interest, I'm sure, to the jurisdictions, which focuses funding towards rural, mid-sized, and large communities, which NAPA would be considered to conduct demonstration projects focused on advanced smart city or community technologies and systems. And then FHWA announced a NOFO for $300 million for the Rural Surface Transportation Grant Program, which the Metropolitan Transportation Commission has prioritized $100 million for State Route 37. So they'll be aggressively pursuing that with the support of the 4 North Bay counties. On the state side, Governor Newsom released his revised budget on Friday, the 13th, and they reported a $97.5 billion surplus, which is more than what we heard at the beginning of the month at $68 billion and significantly more than what I have reported in prior board meetings. Included in his budget is very similar to his initial proposal and somewhat disappointing, I think, to the transportation community. Nevertheless, there's $11.5 billion in tax refunds that are going to help to address inflation. $2.7 billion, and I just should point out that that's partly to address the GAN limit, which now the state is subject to. It tries to keep spending somewhere around the spending levels of the 1970s, 5 years, adjusted for inflation, and the amount of revenues that have come in are significantly exceed what the GAN limit is. So there is a number of refunds, so to speak, or subsidies that will go back to the public. $2.7 billion for emergency rental assistance, $750 million for free public transit. This is an incentive for grants for 3 months that public transportation agencies can apply for. I think MTC would like to see that extended. $439 million to pause sales tax on diesel fuels for 12 months. So that will reimburse those jurisdictions who count on those revenues to maintain their streets and roads. And for transit, $500 million for additional deferred maintenance, $2 billion for housing, including converting vacant office space to new housing. And for transportation, the May revise maintains the governor's original budget at $9.6 billion, which is significantly lower than the Senate proposal, which was $24.5 billion. The proposal does provide $500 million for active transportation, $750 million in incentive grants to transit and rail agencies for free transit, one-time $400 million refund, or sorry, $400 per taxpayer, registered vehicle owner refund. That's again $400, and a 12-month pause, as I noted, on diesel fuels. The Senate released its budget priorities, and it's a lot more optimistic, $13.8 billion for 4 years for transit infrastructure, including $11.8 billion for transit projects split between Southern and Northern California, $2 billion for grade separation projects, something that's sorely needed, $2.9 billion over 4 years for climate investments, including $2 billion for active transportation projects. That's 4 times what the governor's proposing. $875 million for local climate adaptation planning and projects, $1.25 billion for congestion mitigation and bridge repair replacement, $700 million in additional funding for solutions for congested corridor, $550 million over 4 years to augment federal and local funding for high cost local bridge repair and replacement. The Bay Area agencies with taking the lead have sent a letter to the Senate Pro Tem Atkins and Speaker Rendon, as well as Senate and Assembly Budget Committee Chairs Skinner and Ting, supporting the Senate priorities and requesting $100 million in one-time supplemental appropriations for county transportation agencies. These would be used for planning and to ready new pipeline projects for a number of revenues that are coming forward on the bill, federal bill program, and a lot of the state initiatives. This same request is being supported by other major areas in California. LA, San Diego, and Sacramento are all partnering with MTC to seek these funds. There are, with that, 2 new bills on the bill matrix for the board's action today. AB 2428, Friedman bill, would align certain state funding with state plans, including the recently adopted Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, and require the California Transportation Plan be fiscally constrained. Staff has recommended the board take a watch position on this bill. And then SB 121 Gonzalez, which requires the California Transportation Commission biennially to prepare a needs assessment to understand costs associated with maintenance and future growth of the state and local transportation system over a 10-year time horizon. And they must provide a report to the legislature by January 1st, 2024. And staff is recommending that the board take a support position on this bill. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Director. Any questions? I don't see anyone in the board chambers, nor do we have anyone online.
We do not.
All right, Director Miller, are you looking for an action on this?
I am. So there's 2 bills, again, the AB 2428, which is about aligning state funding with Climate Action Plan for transportation infrastructure. And staff is recommending the board just watch this.
Okay. Directors, I'll look for a motion.
Do you want, and there's another bill, do you want to do them separately or together? Okay, SB 1121 Gonzalez requires that the CTC biannually prepare a needs assessment report.
All right. Directors, with that said, I'll look for a motion.
And that, staff is recommending that the board support that bill.
Joseph, so moved.
All right, we have first by Joseph.
Second, Kraus.
Second by Kraus. And Laura, confirming we have no public comment on this item, correct?
We do not.
All right, we have first by Joseph, second by Kraus. Roll call vote, please.
Leon Garcia,
Yes.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Chris Canning,
Yes.
Gary Kraus,
Yes.
Liz Alessio,
Yes.
Scott Sedgley,
Yes.
Alfredo Pedroza,
Yes.
Belia Ramos,
Yes.
Paul Doring,
Yes.
Jeff Ellsworth,
Yes.
Joe Tagliabashi,
Yes.
and John Dunbar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much, directors. Moving on to item 11, future agenda items. Anything before the board? Don't see any directors with their hands raised. We're going to proceed to adjournment. Our next meeting is going to be June 15th, 2022. Valerie, thank you for taking wonderful pictures of those directors in the room. I encourage all directors to come next time if you want to get your picture taken. I think it's great to talk and be able to promote and market all that we do on social media. So thank you very much. With that, meeting adjourned, directors. Thank you.
In memory of Secretary Mineta.
Thank you, Director Miller. In memory of Secretary
Mineta. And I invite the board to come out and see the new bus, which is